Hello and welcome back to another vlog. If you're new here, hi, my name is Georgie. I am the artist and creator behind Georgie's Satin Art, a cat and dinosaur themed online shop. Today's vlog is going to be slightly different than normal because I'm actually going to be painting a pet portrait commission. Now, if you don't know, I have like two sides to my business. I have my cute squishy style of art that I sell at Comic-Cons and tattoo conventions and that sort of thing, and I put that style of art on products. And then I also do traditional art. So this is watercolour paint and graphite pencil. So the portrait I'm going to be doing today is of two cats, and this is going to be for, I believe it's a birthday present for my client. So yeah, I'm basically going to show you how I create a detailed watercolour pet portrait. So let's get into it. So I've already stretched up my board, and I'm just going to trim these edges of the gum strip off because the scratching noise honestly is disgusting. If you have never stretched up paper or you want to know, I do have a little tutorial and I will link that in this video so you can go and watch that. It is an old video, so be prepared. It was one of the first ones I did for this channel. So what I'm going to do is I've obviously got this printed out, but then I'm going to use some carbon paper to essentially trace the image onto my paper. So this is the stuff. It's got a matte side and then a shiny side. The shiny side is what the graphite is on. So this stuff is pretty useful because instead of tracing paper where you'd have to sort of sketch all on one side then flip it over and draw, you don't have to do that. It's taken one step out. The only problem is if you press too hard, it's very difficult to rub out again. So what I like to do is take this off to the corner to begin with and just do sort of a test. So that's probably the pressure I want, very, very light. I tend to place this off to one side a little bit so that I can test colours down the side. Just means that if I need to change the framing when I come to actually cut the image out, I've got a little bit of leeway around the whole edge. What I'm going to do is trace all the main features. This just means that when I start painting, I know that I've got the ear in the right place, the eyes in the right place, they're the right size, etc, etc. I could do the whole grid method. It takes too long, in my opinion. It just means that the cat is definitely going to look like your cat, not just some random cat. And now I've drawn the first line, I'm just going to double check that's the perfect. My camera may not even be picking this up, but that is the perfect lightness that I'm looking for. Now, I'm not looking to draw on every single line. However, with tabbies, I do tend to draw the main lines so that, again, it looks like your pet. And then once I think I'm done, I'm just double checking, looking at the main features, making sure I've got marked on what I think I may need. I think that's that one done. Another little point to make with carbon paper is you also need to be careful where you're placing your hand down because it's a transfer paper. So wherever you're putting pressure down, will make a mark. So if you're really heavy-handed and like holding down your hand like that, it's going to make a smudge on the paper. So just keep your hand, you can like rest your hand, but just keep it like light. Now I've got that drawn in. Before I remove this piece of paper, I'm going to draw on some marks here on the corners, just so that when I come to draw the outline, I can just pop it back down. So it's very, very light, just so that I have an outline to work with. Next up, we grab the paints. This tin I got off Amazon, but the paints inside are Winsor Newton, I believe. This is what my palette looks like. We've even got my cat's hairs in here. Don't normally bother cleaning all this off. I'll just clean off a section to work in. But this is where I tend to keep all my paintbrushes that I want to work with pet portraits, because my cat Jasper really likes to chew paintbrushes. So they're kept nice and secure in here so that he can't do that. I have this very handy dandy guide. So we don't start from this one, we start from here because this is a repeat. I think this is a spare one of this ivory black. So I've written all their names so that if I'm running low, I don't have to take the pan out to find out what the name is. Also, some of my pans I've noticed the names are rubbing off. So I really recommend doing this. And then also doing it as like gradients so you can see the darker colour and the lighter colour that it can make, because that is very useful. I have a selection of paintbrushes that I use, all very tiny ones. This one is more just used for laying down big washes. That's why it's not in that great of a condition. It's actually one I often use for acrylic. My favourite brand so far, they're called Pro Art Masterstroke Series 60 Miniature. So they're teensy. And then I also have this Pro Art Polar. That's my recommendation for paintbrushes. These are just the ones that I get on the best with. So first of all, I want to wet the pans that I want to grab the paint out of, because that will, once they're wet and they've soaked in a bit, that will give me the better payoff colour to pull out of the pan. So we're just going to drop a decent amount of water in there, and then we're going to use sepia. You can generally tell when the water is soaked in enough, because rather than being loose and like thin and chalky, it just feels, the water feels thicker in the pan. And then you know you're getting a decent concentration of pigment that's going to come out. So I've got some of the base creamy colour set down, and I'm just going to go in with a tiny bit of brown because I want to start mapping out these tabby lines. So now I've got this mapped out a little bit, I can now start going in with some darker colours just to continue adding layers essentially. Now this is going to be a detailed pet portrait, so it means that I'm painting lots of minute tiny little hairs that will build up the painting. So I started sketching this out about an hour ago, and this is how much paint we've got down at the moment. I am going to go get a coffee because someone has woken up. Yeah. And he's displeased about the fact that I'm not giving him what he wants. So I'm going to go have a coffee and a break and deal with this munchkin. Back for day 2 of painting this portrait. I only did an hour or so on it yesterday just because I started in the afternoon, so we're back today. Oh, for goodness sake, you can't be up here, my darling. I'd like to point out he has lovely fresh water, but instead he's trying to drink the paint water. You're not having the paint water, mate. I have nearly finished this cat's portrait. There's still obviously a few bits I need to sort out around the nose and the eyes, but the main fur is pretty much there now. So I'm just moving on to the second cat called Pumpkin. So I've just drawn in the pink bits of the ears, and I'm just gonna start basically same process as this cat, but just in orange. So I'm pretty much there with the main portraits. I now need to go in and add the white details, because obviously the eyes look quite dead like that. They need some white in them. I need to add the fur into the ears and obviously the whiskers. So to do that, I'm just going to use some white gouache. Gouache is more pigmented than watercolour. I don't actually know the scientific differences between them, but I like to think of gouache being in between watercolour and acrylic, because gouache is still water soluble, and if you put it down on the paper you can still reactivate it like you can watercolour. It's just this is going to actually stand out on top of the watercolour. You can also mix watercolour colours into gouache as well, which is also what I like to do. The only thing is, this is an older pot of gouache and sometimes it separates a little bit, which is why there's a bit of discoloration. Once you shake it back up again, it is perfectly fine to use. I am going to use the same brush I have been using, which is actually the 2.0. So I've been swapping between the 0, 2.0 and 4.0 of the miniature series of the paintbrushes. The 2.0 I just find has a little bit better of a point compared to the 4.0. So because the paintbrush is like longer, I can get those sort of wispier lines with it, but I'll probably mix between these two for the purposes of this. First of all, I'm going to work on the ears because I need to get ear colour down so that I can go back over the top with watercolour paint, and then the whiskers are normally like the last thing I do because I don't want to have to be going back over. So yeah, once I've got the ear hair in and the whites of the eyes, I'll then send a picture over to the client. Once they've approved that, I'll then add the whiskers, and then that will be the portrait done and I can photograph it. I've really loved working on these two guys. They're so cute and so fluffy. I've also just separated a bit of the paint out and I'm just adding some water to create a bit more of a liquidy texture for this gouache paint. So I've had the approval from the client to go ahead with whiskers, so that is literally the last thing that I need to do now. We're going to paint on this left side normally, and then I'm going to have to flip it around to paint on the other side, because with this I want to work with the angle of my hand, whereas this, it's just a bit of an awkward angle for me. So both cats will work on this side this way up, and then we'll flip it over. That's kind of what I did with the ears as well. Okay, so I've just painted on all the whiskers, and what I do love about gouache is you can kind of see over here that even when you paint on a white background, at some angles you won't be able to see it that well, but then when the light hits it in different ways you can kind of see it on the paper. So it's a really subtle addition onto white backgrounds. This is kind of where we're at with this. The next thing is going to be to send a final photo to my client, and then we're going to cut it off the board, sign it, date it, do a little authenticity certificate, and then get it off ready to post. So I like to cut through where the gum strip is, but where there's still paper. So where there's, this is like where the gum strip is stuck to the board, and this is where I stuck to the paper, and I literally just cut through like that. It just means that when you're cutting through, one, the gum strip doesn't always peel very easily off the board if it's stuck down really well, and two, while you're cutting through, if you cut through here, then the next time you stretch up paper, there's going to be a gouge in the board, so when you paint, it could leave a line in your painting. So you want to cut like towards the edge. There we go. And now that's now off. Then obviously we've still got the gum strip on. I just like to tear off the excess. I will at some point go through and pull off all these little bits, but that is pretty much ready to go for the next time. I do find that my boards tend to bend a little bit, so what I'll do is the next time, I haven't actually torn off the excess on this side, but I'll use this side so that it will curve this way instead the next time. Next, obviously, I need to mark on where 10 by 8 inches is to cut round it. I've actually lost the original printout I had, so I've just printed out another one. So I'm just going to line this back up with the marks I made originally, and then I'm going to use the carbon paper again just to mark on where these lines are. And then we're just going to measure correctly just to make sure that we are at exactly 10 inches. I'm just going to lightly draw on the lines around because I want to make sure that the framing is still good for where the cats are on the paper before I actually go ahead and cut it out. So this is a good example of one where the framing's actually changed. I'm going to shift it over a tiny bit because there are actually whiskers here, which you can see in certain light, but there's nothing here. So I'm just going to move it over a little bit because the framing here is just a little tad tight compared to this side. So I'm just going to move it over a teensy bit. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. So what I'm going to do, so I'll cut the first line, and then when I go to cut the second one, I'll then use my cutting mat to square it. This will just mean that if my square isn't quite perfectly square at the corners, my cutting mat will make sure it is. I'm now just going to go along and make sure that there's no pencil lines. So I put my initials on the front, and then I fully sign it, title it, date it on the back of the portrait. Then I need to scan it, I'll photograph it, and then I'll package it all up. So I will come back to you when I'm packaging the portrait.